Milan Momcilovic still has not decided between Kentucky and Louisville. Should the Cats be panicking? Not yet, but if he doesn't commit here by the end of the weekend, Mark Pope and co., they should be pretty worried.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of the show, we're going to take a look at the bottom of the SEC. Let's get into some power rankings, educate ourselves on who Kentucky is going to be facing this upcoming season. Also, we'll get to a couple of listener questions/comments about the depth of this team. Am I not giving the Cats a fair shake when it comes to the quality of their depth? Mason Williams, the defensive upside of this squad. We'll get to it later on in the show, but first, we've got to talk about the big news of the weekend, the fact that there is no news from Milan Momcilovic, the number one overall player left in the transfer portal, best shooter in all of college ball, transfer from Iowa State, who has decided to withdraw from the NBA drafts and is picking right now between Kentucky, Louisville, and apparently Arizona, at least according to Matt Jones of Kentucky Sports Radio. I'll go ahead and tell you before I take a look at what Matt Jones had to say earlier this afternoon, that if Kentucky lets this recruitment draw out past this weekend, it is a very, very bad thing for the Cats, because as of right now, both schools, the Cards and the Cats, have had Zoom calls with Momcilovic and his agent. Both schools have put in their final offers. They know just how much money they want to pay the kid, and they've made it clear, this is what we're going to pay you. Both of them have submitted their final offers. The longer that Momcilovic decides to mull over possibly taking less money from Louisville to go play for the Cardinals, the worse it is for Mark Pope and company. We have seen how difficult it is for Pope to close on these high-end prospects. If this goes to Monday or Tuesday, I think you, me, and everybody in Big Blue Nation is going to be shaking in their boots saying, where on earth is the commitment? Why has Pope not closed this out? Why is Momcilovic having second thoughts possibly of coming to play at Kentucky after all of the reporting last week indicated that Kentucky was the favorite? A couple of media members went out and flat out publicly predicted Kentucky to win this recruitment by the end of Sunday, mind you. And so if this does not close relatively quickly, and I'm not sitting here within the next 24 hours talking to you about how Kentucky can win the SEC with Milan Momcilovic on their roster, something has gone wrong. But the updates from Matt Jones over at Kentucky Sports Radio, maybe they'll give you a little bit of comfort. Maybe they'll scare you a little bit. The first tweet, and this is public, this is not behind a paywall. He decided to throw this out there. The head man over at Kentucky Sports Radio said, as of 5 p.m. on Saturday, neither Kentucky nor Louisville knew for sure where Milan was going. He also notes, I have no idea what Arizona does or does not know. I do get the sense that both schools think that they're in it. He's talking about Kentucky and Louisville there. So Arizona, according to everybody and their mother, has been a distant third in this recruitment. Joe Tipton said as much, said it's not really them. It's more so St. John's and Louisville and Kentucky. And now that the Johnnies have gone out and gotten Tunde Yesufu and put all their chips in for that star player, then it's going to be a Kentucky-Louisville race. Jeff Goodman saying the same thing. Matt Norlander of CBS Sports saying it's a Kentucky-Louisville race. We'll see what Arizona can do, but they're a distant third. I predict the Wildcats to go and snag the country's best shooter. Second tweet here from Matt Jones. I was told the deal for Milan for either Kentucky or Louisville is set and not going to change. He has both offers. Again, I don't know about Arizona. And once he picks, an announcement comes immediately thereafter. Again, I'd like to reiterate, the longer that this thing goes on, the longer that Momcilovic mulls this over and thinks about going to play for the Cards after everything has been laid out for him in Lexington, the money, which we'll get to in a second, is still above Louisville. The role, the fit in the offense, everything makes sense for him to come play for Mark Pope in Pope's third season here with the Cats. Everything lines up for that. I know that there are some people that are worrying about Arizona. Let's put that to the side for a second, because if they were a legitimate player in this race, Joe Tipton or Matt Norlander or somebody with a credible source and knowledge of the recruitment would have come out already by now and slapped an article behind a paywall, basically, and told you Arizona's got more legs in this than we thought they did. Somebody would have said that by now. And the fact that they haven't means that the Cats of Arizona at this time don't. Third and final tweet from Matt Jones over at KSR. I think both Kentucky and Louisville gave their final offers to Milan yesterday. Louisville ended up raising theirs, but it's still slightly behind Kentucky's. The wild card is Arizona. Nobody I have talked to has any idea whether they are in it and if they are in the ballpark. I will reiterate to you, and this is not me calling Matt Jones an idiot or a liar or anything like that. I'm just going to tell you, based on what other credible outlets have said, Arizona does not have the money, nor do they have the fit for him. Obviously, Koa Pete's gone now, but they don't have the fit for him over a place like Kentucky, over a place like Louisville, honestly. Because do you know what Arizona likes to do with their offense? They do not like to shoot threes. They do not like to have wings and forwards who jack up a ton of outside shots. Last season, in terms of just raw point distribution, they were 360th nationally in percentage of points that came from beyond the arc. Now, that doesn't mean they can't go and get a sharpshooter like Milan Momcilovic, but if we're talking about system fit, and Momcilovic wants to come back and get paid, play well, and have fun doing it on a contender, Arizona does not check all of the boxes. Louisville and Kentucky would at that point. You can sit there in the YouTube comments or on TikTok or on Twitter. You can sit there and whine and moan and complain about the fact that Kentucky's not a contender. You can't say that. Milan Momcilovic, according to computer models that you and I both agree are valuable, Evan Mia, Ken Palm, Torvik, etc., they will all agree, Evan Mia already does, that Kentucky is a borderline to already a top 10 team if they add Momcilovic to this roster, and that's without predicting some of these players to develop and get better. Wilkins, Diallo, Moreno, etc. Arizona's not in the race right now. Louisville does not have a better spot for him. So as it stands, heading into Sunday, Kentucky should still be leading this. They still are offering more money. It's still a better spot for him to go and play ball. All of it lines up for Milan Momcilovic to still come to Kentucky. So there's no reason to panic right now. If he is not committed by the end of Sunday, you need to start to worry a little bit. If he's not committed by the end of Monday, then you really need to start to panic, because that means Louisville's getting in his ear, or he's really starting to consider both sides. To me, again, biased, feels pretty obvious. Feels pretty obvious, has from the jump where he should end up going. But that's the latest on Milan Momcilovic. Hate that we did not get any sort of update over the weekend. I really expected something to pop late Friday or early Saturday. It did not, which is unfortunate. We sit here and we wait. Sucks, but we'll wait. In the meantime, though, I want to get to a couple of listener questions about this year's team. And maybe I'm not giving Kentucky's depth a fair shake. Maybe I'm not giving Mason Williams enough credit. Maybe I'm not giving the defensive potential of this team enough credit. Let's dive into a couple of comments here from a couple of listeners in just a moment. Before we do it, though, I'll tell you guys about our friends over at Indeed. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you still have to fill just sitting there wide open. When the pressure is on and you need to make the right hire for your business, just to ace a hire, you are looking to go to Indeed Sponsored Jobs. It's a job for them, because Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for here. So skills, experience, location, things that matter to you and your business. Indeed Sponsored Jobs can help you find people who fit the qualifications that you're looking for. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post miraculously. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute or so that I'll talk to you about Indeed, companies like yours have already made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring right now, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who actually check all the boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves over at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. If you need to hire, it's a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. All right, continuing along here on today's episode of the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Subscribe if you have not already. Let me know what you think about the Milan Momcilovic sweepstakes right now. A lot of you not so happy in the comments, but I'll just go ahead and tell you, you can't panic just yet, because reality is we still got about 24 hours before we actually have to start panicking as to whether or not Milan is going to end up in Lexington at the end of the day, because it completely changes Kentucky's season. We've already talked about it. We'll talk about it when he commits. It will either completely ruin this offseason. It will go ahead and put the knife in the back of what was already a dying, pathetic offseason. Or it'll give us new life and something to celebrate here over the course of this summer, which I'm not going to lie to you guys, might end up being pretty boring, because I don't know if you read the reports. Kentucky's probably not making an overseas trip this summer. They're not going to Israel. They're probably not going to France. Pope said they're going to have to put it on the back burner for maybe next season effectively. So that's out the window. Would have been great for this team's chemistry. I'll just go ahead and tell you that. But unfortunately, it's not on the table. A couple of listener questions I want to get to here to talk about Kentucky's depth and their upside for a moment, because maybe I'm not giving Kentucky a fair shake. Old Big Blue fan 8778 doesn't have a question, but he had a really long comment that I found interesting. He says Lance, or they say Lance. I don't know if it's a she. Maybe it's a she. I have a couple of thoughts about this team's floor. I agree with your concerns about Wilkins' shift to the 2 and his potential durability. The X factor in the backcourt might be Mason Williams. He did not get the national exposure that might have pushed him into 5-star status, but my gut says that the young man is an absolute dog who can score at all 3 levels. Justin McBride is another guy who is going to be very solid. I think they'll be able to play bully ball if the threes aren't falling, and against the teams that rely on that style of play. I'm not saying that the floor is as high as some of the other conference powers, but I'm confident that they will still be able to grind out wins on off nights. And I think they're better constructed to absorb some injuries. The depth pieces just seem much better this season than either of the past 2 rosters. I hope I am right. First of all, thank you for the comment. Really appreciate it. Very well thought out. Second of all, I think that you are spot on. When it comes to the depth of this team, we're going to compare it to the last couple of Mark Pope squads. The depth on this team is infinitely better, especially than year 1, but it's definitely better than both years, because last year, who'd you have coming off the bench? Jasper Johnson, Cam Williams, Andrea Yelovich, Brandon Garrison. Jalen Lowe, whenever he was healthy, only started a couple of games. He came off the bench in 9 because he was hurt. Trent Noah, Cam, Garrison, Jasper, Low, like that is just not a quality bench. We learned very quickly, despite all of the money that Kentucky spent on that roster, the bench was not good. And the bench ended up eventually having to start because Kentucky had so many injuries, and then the season fell apart. You know how that went. The depth on year 1, also not great. Despite Kentucky being 27th nationally in bench minutes per game, I was not fired up whenever I saw, especially towards the end of the year, Travis Perry having to play significant minutes at point guard, Trent Noah having to play at shooting guard, Brandon Garrison having to contribute serious minutes at backup center. Compared to Amari Williams, he was not very good. Ainsley Almanor, as good as he was within his role, lacked versatility. And so what this commenter is saying here, I completely agree with as far as the depth and as far as what Kentucky is going to be able to do on the wing, especially with players like Justin McBride, who can be major matchup problems. Ousmane Ndiaye is a major matchup problem at 6'11" because of how well he operates beyond the perimeter. Now, maybe, hopefully not, maybe he is a one-trick pony because he's only 215, 220 pounds, and he's not able to work consistently inside the arc. I hope that's not the case. Maybe he's able to bulk up a little bit this offseason. But the fact that he can stretch out beyond the three-point line is going to prove to be a very difficult guard for at least some teams because they just simply won't have the personnel to put up with it. It's the same thing for Braden Hawthorne. It's going to be the same thing for Cam Williams if Milan Momcilovic ends up coming to this team. Kentucky's got a lot of depth here on the wing that they should be very excited about attacking various matchups night in and night out in the SEC. What I will say about Wilkins is, again, I agree. I'm glad we're on the same page on that. It's just a concern. I'm not telling you it's going to happen. But the X factor in the backcourt being Mason Williams is interesting. Because as it stands today, and this is subject to change, especially with injuries, maybe he just plays better than we expect. As it stands today, I don't expect Mason Williams to get a ton of run. I don't expect him to be a major factor in the backcourt. There's a chance that depending on how things go, he might redshirt. But this is a wild card, or an X factor, I guess maybe you could say, because of the point that the commenter made. He didn't get the national exposure that might have pushed him higher in recruiting rankings. He was mid 100, 130s, 140s, four-star prospect, solidly a four-star prospect, but a player up until he started shooting really well during the EYBL Scholastic circuit that he was on. A player that, honestly, not only did we not know a ton about, nobody really knew a ton about. It's a guy that we all collectively have very little scouting, statistics, information on. So maybe we are undervaluing Mason. There's a chance that he ends up being a hyper-efficient shooter from three, a solid ball handler, somebody with a low center of gravity and some strength that, frankly, Kentucky needs out of a freshman point guard. They didn't get that last season out of Jasper. Somebody who's a little bit stronger with the ball in his hands. Someone who can also be a better spot-up option for you. That would be really refreshing to have as your third option at point guard. It would also make Kentucky's rotations a little bit easier if they had a third guy that they could go to provide a spark outside of having to slide Alex Wilkins up. If Wilkins ends up being special at shooting guard, yeah, I would love it if I saw a world where Mason Williams could play 12 minutes a game, shoot 38% from three, and just take care of the ball. That would be awesome, especially if Malachi Marino takes a step as a playmaker, because then Williams can come in, and now you got two guys that can shoot in Williams and Wilkins. Then you have more versatility. That also, you factor in the fact that what if Diallo doesn't end up being a better shooter than he already is at 32%? Well, that, guess what? You have a counter to that, personnel-wise. You have another option there. So I think that that's a really interesting take to say maybe he's the X factor. We'll have to wait and see. He's somebody that we don't know about. But as it stands here, heading into June, it's just a guy that I don't think gets a ton of run. But he could. He very well could. He could pull a Reed Shepherd, and he could play really well during the summer. He could play really well during practice, and he ends up flying up the rotation. The second question here, and this is a little bit more of a, I hate to say it, it's kind of like a, well, I mean, I don't know. E to the F&D, a longtime listener of the show, says, Lance, why can't this team be a shutdown defensive team? It seems like we have good length and athleticism. We have good length. I will tell you that, everybody. We are going to be very tall. With Diallo at 6'4", Wilkins at 6'5", Momcilovic, Cam, and Hawthorne somewhere between 6'8" and 6'9", McBride at 6'8", Njai, Marino, and Kepnong somewhere between 6'11" and 7 feet tall, and then Reese Potter coming off the bench at 7'2", if he does play. It's a very, very tall team. I would be careful to assume that this team is athletic, that they're going to be as athletic as some of Cal's teams, because when we start to have the conversations about Kentucky's speed, about their athleticism, about their quality of athlete, period, from top to bottom, I am forever, from here on out, I'm going to take a look at this past year's team that we were told was going to be way more athletic, was going to be better in transition, was going to be stronger, and say, well, on paper and in terms of what we saw on film, we thought that team was going to be athletic, quote unquote. And then they weren't. Like, I hate to dog on last year's squad. They just weren't all that athletic. At the very least, not in relation to some of the other high-profile teams in this league. So if I'm looking at this year's roster, I say, yeah, Zoom Diallo is a really good point guard. He's not like a ripping off the rim at 6'4". As we've already detailed on the show, he's not the best rim finisher in the world, despite having some legitimate muscle and size at 6'4". Wilkins at 6'5" is not ripping the rim off. He's not a high flyer. He's not a strong player. Milan Momcilovic is your stationary shooter. Cam Williams is also kind of your stationary shooter. We don't know what Braden Hawthorne is yet, so we'll set him to the side. Justin McBride, we'll see. Can he, at 245 pounds, still be the freight train athletically that Kentucky needs him to be? Does Ousmane Ndiaye get to show it, or does his lack of weight not allow him to show an athletic capabilities, I guess I should say? And maybe it's unfair to just basically equate athleticism to how easily can you dunk, which I think is just a conversation for another day, is what qualifies as athleticism, quote unquote, at the college level. But in my mind, I'm relating all of this back to the Calipari years. What were those quote unquote athletes doing night in and night out with the basketball in their hands? Without the basketball, what were their defensive intangibles? What were they capable of doing? Were they capable of quickly rotating over to cover the rim? Were they able to swat shots? Were they able to sky in for rebounds? Because when I look at this team, my first thought is not overly athletic squad or super athletic squad. And so when you ask a question like, why can't they be I'll use Ito's words here, E's words here, a shutdown defensive team. I don't see it with the personnel, because I like our length, but we're not athletically stronger than an Arkansas, than a Duke. We're on paper, we're just not. Now, they could go out there and prove us wrong. I mean, last season, like I said, we thought they were going to be athletic, and to me, they weren't. We can sit here and say, well, they're not that athletic. They're just really, really good. And then they could end up being McBride, Ndiaye, Kepnong, Hawthorne, Wilkins. I mean, they could all end up being really special for their position athletically. I just don't see the speed and what vertical, I guess I should say, and then strength. Like, you're not seeing that across the roster here. And when you talk about what teams need to be really good defensively, I mean, obviously you need energy, you need buy-in, but you also need athletes. Like, you just need guys who are just quick and strong. And I'm not telling you that this team is not quick and strong. I mean, obviously these are Division I college level athletes that are playing at the University of freaking Kentucky. Yeah, no, they're great, but it's all relative, right? It's all relative to what Kentucky wants to be. And if we're talking about shut down defensively, I just don't see it. What I can tell you is that they will probably be much better. There's a chance they will be much better defensively. And they already took a step forward last year. There's a chance they can be much better because Moreno is a pretty decent rim protector already. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek. He's a good rim protector. And then Kepnong, that's what we brought him in to do. He's the enforcer behind Moreno. Those two are going to be really fun to watch this season protecting the rim. This might be Kentucky's best 2-point field goal defense that they have had in over 5 years. 5 years plus. It has been a long time since Kentucky has had rim protectors like this. So just based off of that alone, Kentucky might be better. And then their length can help them out when teams have to resort to more, I guess, mid-range to outside shot diets. Maybe you push them out further and you utilize your length to contest a little bit easier. You don't have to be the quickest. You just have to have guys down low who can stop the ball. I don't know. Maybe there is a world where Kentucky shut down, but I don't see it. I think you see improvement. I don't know if you see shutdown. I have questions about Alex Wilkins as a defender. I have questions about Milan Momcilovic. I have questions about Justin McBride. I have questions about Zoom Diallo as a defender. So we'll see, but there's a chance. We'll see. I do like the question, though. I think it's a very kind of we don't know. I mean, I'm just giving you my opinion, but we don't truly know. Okay. Last thing I want to talk about here. First and foremost, pause for water. Because goodness knows, we all need it. You guys ever take the pause for water with me? Sound off in the comments. Okay, so I got one more thing I want to talk about. We're going to discuss this at length tomorrow on Sunday. But I wanted to go ahead and take a look at what the rest of the SEC is doing. Because if Kentucky doesn't end up getting Milan Momcilovic, I mean, the first thing that we have to look at here, instead of, oh, can Kentucky make a run in the NCAA tournament? Can they compete in their own conference? And so I want to put together a power rankings. I want to put together a tier list, basically, and I'll tell you where Kentucky's at when we get to them on a much bigger breakdown tomorrow. But I want to go ahead and give you a preview because nobody really wants to talk about the bottom of this conference to begin with. We're going to educate ourselves. At the very least, we're going to educate ourselves today, guys. So I'm going to talk to you, in my opinion, about the 4 worst teams in the SEC heading into the 26-27 season. Tomorrow, we will talk about numbers 12 through 1. You're going to like where Kentucky's at, especially if they get Momcilovic. But we're going to start here at the bottom of the barrel with South Carolina. What have they been doing this offseason? What do they look like now under Lamont Paris? South Carolina is last on my board, but I think Paris clearly attacked the right problem. So South Carolina's offense last season absolutely sucked. They were 112th nationally in adjusted efficiency. They were 319th nationally in three-point shooting percentage, 226 in effective field goal percentage. They did not grab O boards. They did not consistently get to the charity stripe. In SEC play, they were dead last in 2-point, 3-point, effective field goal percentage, offensive rebounding percentage, and efficiency. They were just flat out bad. So they needed scoring. They needed shooting. They needed functional offensive players. They went out and got Corey Mincy from George Mason, Camden Heide from Texas, Shane Blakeney from Drexel, Jacob Nickus from Duquesne, Davion Hanna from Alabama. Mincy averaged over 14 points per game at George Mason. Blakeney averaged over 14 at Drexel. Heide shot really well at Texas. He's going to be a great functional piece tweener guy for them. Davion Hanna, formerly a highly touted prospect who gives them some upside there. So the additions here make sense. They also lost a lot. Eli Strong, Eli Ellis, Jordan Butler, EJ Walker, Cam Scott. They lost a lot of pieces to the portal. And so the bigger issue here is that not only do they lose a lot, and the guys that they're bringing in are just not like wow you type players, they're also trying to climb from the bottom of the barrel. Like even some of their returners paired with these portal players, like they're just not, the talent is not there. There's a 13-19 team that went 4-14 in SEC play. And this conference, even a good offseason can move you from like bad to competitive to like push you on the bubble. It's not going to push you from competitive to dangerous. The shooting should be better. The floor for their offense should be better. But I'm going to have to see how they play against the high-end talent in this league that's already been proven. South Carolina knew what was broken, but they just didn't add enough. Right? So South Carolina is number 16 here. At number 15, and a lot of people might not like this, very specific person that I know is watching the show might not like this. I've got Ole Miss at 15. I think Ole Miss might end up being the worst team in this league under Chris Beard. I think they'll end up being one of the worst, full stop. And they're interesting, right? Because they did add a lot of pieces, and they got bigger, and they're a little bit more versatile, but they're not scary. We're talking about adding high-end talent. They just didn't really do that. So you get Bud Clark from Seton Hall, Deshir Haskins from St. Joseph's. You get Christian Brown from James Madison, Santiago Truitt from Arizona State, Savon Cicic from Pepperdine. It's a lot of size, positional flexibility. They've got a bunch of front court and wing options here. Bud Clark is going to give them a proven guard. But they also, again, you take a look at what's leaving. They lost a ton. Grayson is leaving. Corey Chess is leaving. Tyus Jordan, Corin Johnson, Travis Perry, Nico Bundalo, James Scott. Like a lot is going out the door for this Rebel squad. And yeah, they added solid players. But again, they didn't add a star. They didn't add a clear SEC caliber star. So in the SEC, solid can like push you towards the bubble, can push you towards contention, but you're still going to be in the bottom third. That's how deep this league is, and that's how it's going to be from here on out until something changes. So Chris Beard, defensively, schematically, can he make this team annoying to play against? Absolutely. They were annoying to play against last year for whenever they played the Cats. Couldn't come close because Colin Chandler's the GOAT. But Bud Clark, Deshir Haskins, Could they become difference makers? Yes, but they're not. On paper, they're not. At Ole Miss, they're not. In this conference, they're not. And so Ole Miss, they play spoiler in this league, in my opinion, this season, instead of being a team that I'm ready to like walk into bubble conversation. At number 14, I have Georgia. You guys know how I feel about the Bulldogs, how I feel about Mike White. And I don't think this team is bad. They just lost two really important players in Jeremiah Wilkinson and Somto Cyril, now going to Arkansas and Miami. Wilkinson being the leading scorer, Cyril being a mammoth of a human being at center, and it's a lot to replace. So yes, they did add talent. Freddie DeLeon comes in from Penn State. He led the Nittany Lions in points per game. Andrew Osasui comes in from St. Bonaventure. Brady Dunlap comes in from St. Louis. David Ugana-Ike comes in from the NBA's academy over in Africa. James Scott comes in from Ole Miss. And then the returners, I mean, you got to be excited about rotational players, or I think Blue Kane might actually be a starter, but Cannon Catchings, Kareem Stagg, Mike White has a base to work with. But again, to kind of compare it to these other two teams I have at the bottom of the barrel, I don't think they replace their top-end production cleanly enough. Like, DeLeon, like, on paper is great from Penn State, but he's not better than Jeremiah Wilkinson. Replacing Somto Cyril was going to be basically impossible because of just how good of a rim protector he is. So do with that what you will with Georgia's front court this season. I mean, best of luck to you guys. They've earned some respect. Mike White is what he is in this league. They can be competitive. But this at the end of the day, this feels more like a team that's fighting to be competitive, trying to punch up into NCAA tournament status, than a team that's going to be pushing for even the top half of this league, middle, like top half, top 6, top 5 of this league. At least, in my opinion. They added bodies. It's the same with these other schools. They added bodies, but are they difference makers? Not really. And you're going to get the same thing with number 13 in Oklahoma. They're not a disaster. And honestly, you can make the argument that the roster makes more sense than people realize. So Porter Moser, he added 5 key guys here. Pop Isaacs being the biggest name. Transfer from Texas A&M previously, I believe at Texas Tech and Creighton. Just been all over the place. Tyler Hendricks from Utah Valley. Connie Ruths from Louisville. You guys might know that name. Yak from Oregon State. Goated name there. Akolda Gak from the G League. Another goated name. So Oklahoma gets a pretty clear idea of what they want to be with just these transfers alone. Isaacs gives them SEC experience. Hendricks gives them a 6'6" wing shooter. Connie Roos gives them some athletic upside. And then Gak and Yak gives them real size. The Sooners also have some interesting returning pieces, most notably Xavier Brown, who's a really good shooter, Tay Davis, Darian Reed, Kai Rogers, Gage Mayfield joins the fold as a freshman. It's not a roster that looks totally empty. I mean, I like some of these pieces. I like Xavier Brown as a player. The question here is whether Oklahoma, again, has enough high-end SEC talent to climb into the upper echelon of this league. And when I'm comparing them to some of these other schools, even the ones who just don't have great rosters, I mean, some of them still added stars, right? So that's why I'm hesitating. Shooting, size, positional logic, but it's only going to get them to competitive, at least on paper. And Pop Isaacs can help. Ruths can help as upside pieces. But when you look at teams like Florida, Kentucky, Bama, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, Auburn, Mississippi State, again, the reason I value them a little bit higher on this list is because they have a guy in Josh Hubbard. I just don't see the same level of certainty here. So when you're looking at the bottom of this league and you're thinking about the Gamecocks, the Bulldogs, the Sooners, the Rebels, you're seeing moves that I think logistically make sense for these teams' rosters, but they're all losing important pieces, some to an extent. Oklahoma maybe less than the others. But also the players that they're adding just they're not doing anything for me, and they're probably not doing anything for the fan bases that they play for, honestly. So maybe, and this is a weird way to close the show, maybe the bottom of this league is not as competitive as it has been for the last 2 seasons. I'd love it if Kentucky had 4 games on their schedule that they just felt good that they could go and win regardless of whether or not they were on the road or not. Be really sweet to be like, okay, I know that Kentucky can play well or play horribly against these 4 squads and know that they're probably going to pick up a dub. Unfortunately, that just hasn't existed under Pope. Not until this point. So there's your bottom 4. We will talk about the top 12 in full detail on tomorrow's episode of the show. If you want to know more about this league, who's going where Kentucky's at, why I think Kentucky's going to compete in this conference, go ahead and subscribe. Episode will be in your inbox here soon. You can follow the show on Twitter at LockedOnUK for now. You can also follow the show on Instagram at Kentucky Podcast. Follow me on Twitter over at Lance Dawe _. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow, hopefully for a celebration of a Milan Momcilovic commitment, and then to break down the rest of this league. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and God bless.